break down the 5 stars in attendance for the game of the weekend. Plus, we saw freshmen across the country making noise in their college football debut. So who's up next? Our expert gives you freshmen to watch. And NIL drama hits the swamp. Why one former college player is still paying for his NIL deal. How other athletes can avoid these, quote, predatory loans. All that and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside Blair and Gulo, I am Emily Proud. A reminder to be a part of the chat today. People are very excited already. The only way you can see it, though, is if you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Highly recommend you do that. One more request. Like this video so we know that you're watching. You hit that like button. Blair and I, we're going to go hit the headlines because there are many. Lock it in. 5-star Brandon Baker, the #1 offensive lineman in the 2024 class, will make his commitment live with #CommitHQ. Yep, that's right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. He will pick between schools like Ohio State, Nebraska, Oregon, Texas, and many more. It all goes down Sunday, September 24th. Blair, where are you leaning?
Oregon has had a lot of buzz, Emily, and that's been for a long time, but Texas appears to have the momentum right now. And what a pickup that would be for the Longhorns that right now are surging on the recruiting trail.
See what happens on the field this Saturday, but what a win that would be. In more 5-star news, this from the 2025 class, the #1 quarterback Bryce Underwood is planning a visit to see Coach Prime at the end of the month. Colorado has emerged as a contender in this race, but why should Buffs fans get excited about the prospect of landing a guy like this?
Because Primetime knows a thing or two about reeling in #1 rated prospects. Travis Hunter, the #1 recruit in the 22 class. Cormani McClain, the #1 corner in the 23 class. Deion has done it before, and he'll likely do it again.
1-0 and could be getting #1. More on the Buffs big weekend ahead with Steve Wiltfong. That's coming up next. Meanwhile, in Texas, the Longhorns landing 4-star edge Zina Umeozulu on Wednesday. What does he add to the #17th ranked class?
More defensive star power. The Longhorns keep stacking edges and linebackers ahead of their move to the SEC. This class now features Umeozulu and 5-star Colin Simmons after the Longhorns signed the #1 linebacker in America last year, Anthony Hill. So that Horns defense is trending up.
Whew, just in time for a move to the SEC. All right, finally, Texas Tech is set to host some of their top targets in 2024 and 2025 as they host Oregon Saturday night. How important is this weekend for Joey McGuire and his staff?
They need a great performance in the worst way. The Red Raiders are looking to bounce back after that double overtime loss to Wyoming in week 1. The Ducks storm into town as favorites, and with a loaded visitor list expected to be in the stands, Texas Tech has a huge opportunity this weekend.
Time now for the Wiltfong Whip Around with our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, let's start in the Lone Star State. 4-star defensive lineman Nigel Smith is set to announce his commitment tomorrow. Looks like it's between Oklahoma, Ohio State, Penn State, and Texas A&M. But where are you leaning a day out?
Leaning towards the Boomer Sooners. Oklahoma has been the program to watch for Nigel Smith since Brent Venables and his staff got to Norman. They were one of the first prospects they reached out to and prioritized, from Coach Chavis to Coach Bates. He has felt a close connection with them. He has been to campus numerous times. I mean, he's recently been on Oklahoma's campus, and just the trajectory of the program. You talk to him about OU, and he points to Coach Venables having #1 defenses at Kansas State and Clemson. He thinks that's the trajectory at Oklahoma, relationship with Coach Valai, the entire staff. I think he feels very comfortable in Norman, and I like where Oklahoma sits going into this announcement.
If Oklahoma ends up landing Nigel Smith, he'll push that class into the top 10. It'll give them 23 commitments. So with only a few spots remaining, Steve, what's left on the board for the Sooners?
Well, they had a lot of top targets on campus this past weekend for their 73-0 romp over Arkansas State. A couple official visitors, offensive lineman Daniel Nkinkumi, who is from over the pond in Europe, was on campus. The crystal ball favoring Oklahoma for him. There's video of him out there running the 40-yard dash in under 5 seconds. So freaky traits for him, a guy that Bill Bedenbaugh and company have honed in on. He talked about how the fan base is amazing. He talked about the history of developing offensive linemen in the culture. That was his first ever college game, so he's still only seen one team score a touchdown in person in his life. It's the Sooners. I think he'll help Oklahoma score touchdowns for years to come. And then Danny Okoye is a very coveted edge player from Noah Homeschool there in state, was back on campus. He raved about his visit. He has future official visits planned with LSU in Tennessee. Last I heard, those were maybe getting canceled. I think Tennessee's still battling to try and get him to come back to Knoxville. This is a prospect that that Texas has also really pushed for, but I think that Oklahoma is clearly the one to beat for him coming out of his official visit. I had some other young men on campus. 5-star Terry Bussey was one of them, an athlete recruit from the Lone Star State. I still like A&M for him. He said it was a great visit. He talked about the relationships he's built with the staff. Says he loves everything about OU. He's going to be at Alabama this weekend, more on the Tide in a little bit. LSU is a player there. I still like A&M for Bussey, but Oklahoma, Michael Boganowski's a linebacker, safety, rover type player that was back on campus. He's taken his time with the decision, but the culture fit at Oklahoma, they love Venables and his defense and the track record there. And something that all these guys mention about Oklahoma is that Soul Mission program that they have there. That's something that these guys really like regarding the culture and the development of just being a man. Also is something going into Oklahoma's favor for a lot of these kids. And so Oklahoma had a top 5 class last year, guys. They're in great position to finish with the top 10 class this year. Nigel Smith would certainly be a nice bump there. And then they got a chance to get a lot of those guys that visited this weekend.
Steve, I like to keep you on your toes, so I'm going to ask early in our segment to go ahead and hit that like button. I'm supposed to tell you that it keeps the content free. That kind of sounds like a threat, but I'm not above it, so go ahead, hit that like button. We got more decisions to talk about, though. 4-star linebacker Chris Cole out of Virginia. He is picking between a top 6 on Sunday. USC, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Miami, Georgia, and Tennessee. What's the latest with him?
Well, I still like Georgia on the 24/7 Sports crystal ball for Chris Cole. Relationship with Glenn Schumann, Kirby Smart, the track record of player development at the position, the scheme on defense, and really just them, the stage they play on, the 2 straight national championships. Those are things that have put them in great position. But this official visit to USC this past weekend, it makes me nervous about the crystal ball for Georgia, because the time spent with Lincoln Riley talking about the linebackers that they've recruited. He's the number 1 linebacker target on their board this cycle. The NIL opportunities. His father lives out in the Los Angeles area. There's a lot of excitement for Chris Cole about a potential decision to play for USC. And he's going to be at Tennessee this weekend on his official visit. So we'll see if Tennessee can leapfrog from where I think they're in the 3rd position all the way up to the number 1 position. They get the last in-person chance to impress. But talking to people, talking to Chris, talking to people around Chris, talking to other sources around the recruitment, I still have Georgia on the crystal ball, but USC certainly giving them a lot to think about. And we'll see what the Vols can do with their official visit this weekend.
Steve, there are a bunch of big games this weekend, and recruits are antsy to hit the road. Let's start with Colorado against Nebraska. Coach Deion Sanders making a loud statement in week 1 with that victory at TCU. What has been the recruiting effect of what we saw from Coach Prime?
Man, recruits are buzzing about Colorado on the trail. Guys, this is a 10 a.m. local kickoff against Nebraska for them. Talking to some people around the program, by 1 p.m., there could be a lot of electric talk about Colorado if they can do in Boulder what they just did in Fort Worth. And they're going to have some top targets on campus. Top 247 athlete Cameron Michael from the Peach State is taking his official visit along with his teammate edge rusher Amontre Bradford. Cameron Michael, some schools like him in the secondary, some schools like him at wideout. Colorado, they have a track record all of a sudden of playing guys over 100 snaps on both sides of the ball. He said he would be certainly interested in that if it were to work out for him that way, if he did pick Colorado, but he's one of the top two-way players in the country. Visiting Colorado this weekend, was there for their spring game. He's high on them as he also considers Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, among others for him. And they're also trying to get Gage Ginther on campus. He's an in-state offensive lineman. He's committed to Tennessee. They're trying to get the spatula out on Gage Ginther. I think Colorado can be spatula city this cycle. It was Auburn a year ago. But Colorado, if they have the year that they're planning to have, they're going to make these programs that have top guys committed work all the way up to December as they aim for another Travis Hunter type flip, another Cormani McClain type flip. Gage Ginther, that's a guy that they would love to flip. But the big news around Colorado right now this week is their 2025 quarterback recruiting, guys. They're in on two of the absolute nation's best, including the number one player at the position, Bryce Underwood, out of Belleville High in Michigan. He's a two-time state champion. He was trying to get to Colorado this weekend. 10 a.m. kickoff, logistics, wasn't going to make it happen, but they talked to him and his family, talked to Deion Sanders this week. His dad, his mom, and Bryce, they were blown away by the conversation. Certainly they saw the highlights from the win over TCU. They're not able to get there this weekend. They're going to be out there for the USC game. They see an opportunity to play early there. Now, starting right away is not the most important thing, but playing early is a factor in Bryce's decision. So they see that. They see what Deion Sanders did at Jackson State. They see what he's quickly doing at Colorado. They love the coaching staff there. They want to get to know them better. They're excited to get out there for the USC game and see that atmosphere. He's going to be at LSU for the Auburn game. LSU's a major contender. We know he's going to pop up at nearby Michigan, Alabama, and Oregon hanging around for Bryce Underwood. And then you have Antoine Hill. He's the number 6 quarterback in the country in the 24/7 Sports Player Rankings from Houston County in Georgia. He's going to visit Colorado for the Stanford game. They're on his short list as well. So Colorado, I think that they got a great chance to sign one of the nation's best quarterbacks in this 2025 cycle. Who's it going to be? I don't know. But if they keep putting up 500 yards of offense, passing offense, 4 receivers over 100 yards receiving apiece, that's an exciting offense to potentially play in. And they have 2 of the nation's best quarterbacks strongly considering going out there to play their college football.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I want to play in that Sean Lewis coached offense. That was electric. Deion's been saying from the beginning, I ain't that hard to find. And man, 1-0, and they are flocking to Boulder. Let's go down south. Alabama hosting Texas in the most anticipated matchup on Saturday night. Now, while everyone's watching the battle on the field, we're keeping our eye on the recruiting battles, which only stand to intensify when Texas eventually joins the SEC. But how big of a recruiting weekend will this one be for the home team Tide?
Yeah, this is 5-star central this weekend as far as programs taking their visits. One guy I want to highlight in the 2024 class, we could talk all day, so you got to go to Bama Online for that conversation for who's visiting Alabama this weekend. But Daniel Hill is a top 247 athlete recruit from Mississippi who Alabama's recruiting as a running back. But as you see right there on this first clip, he's making plays out of the slot as a running back. He started his high school career as a running back. Now he's one of the most ferocious ball carriers in the country. He's actually playing quarterback here as a senior. His play style reminds of Jahmyr Gibbs with his ability to be versatile within that offense. He's been visiting Alabama for a decade now. And this is one of their most coveted recruits on the board as they try and add to a recruiting class that ranks number 4 nationally. Daniel Hill had a decision date. South Carolina appeared like the favorite, but he's held off on deciding. I think Alabama's got a major is one of the major reasons why I could easily see him picking Alabama. They're excited to get there, check out what's going to be an awesome primetime game atmosphere. But talking to his family today, his dad talked about the running back pedigree, how many running backs Alabama has in the league right now, it being a development factory. I think that is huge for the Crimson Tide. So he is the 2024 recruit, in my opinion. to watch this weekend that I think could ultimately end up in their class. He's going to take an official to Tennessee later this month before deciding, and the Gamecocks are still in there. And then two 2025s that I really want to highlight. You have our number one ranked player in the country, offensive lineman Deion Sanders. There's been a lot of talk about Georgia and his recruitment early, and Clemson was a dream offer for him. But he's been to Alabama several times, including at the end of the summer. They got to spend a lot of time with Nick Saban, and Eric Wolford, the offensive line coach, shadowed them on their visit. And on that last visit, that was where they kind of laid out the plan for David and what it's like to develop within Alabama's program. He did a scavenger hunt. They did a picnic. They enjoyed the laid-back atmosphere. Now they're coming back for what should be a great game experience. Alabama's on the short list for Deion Sanders with Georgia, Clemson, Michigan, and Tennessee, and some others. And then George McIntyre, he's the number 2 quarterback in the country in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings. He's the number 1 quarterback in the country on Alabama's board. He was the first signal caller that offensive coordinator Tom Rees offered when he got over to Tuscaloosa. He's been to Alabama several times. He's had a lot of conversation with Nick Saban, and just loves getting that advice from Coach Saban, and loves the pedigree and guys that he's coached, and said there's just no other coach with the credibility to mention the great players that he's coached. Perhaps he'll be one of the next great players that Nick Saban coaches. And similar to what Nick Hill's dad or Daniel Hill's dad said about running backs in Alabama and the NFL, they boast a lot of quarterbacks in the league as well. So those are just 3 of the many blue chippers that are going to be at Alabama this weekend for what's going to be an awesome ball game.
Steve, we've got Spatula City, we've got 5-Star Central. I think you've got to start making some T-shirts, my friend. People are clamoring for them. And speaking of clamoring, I hear there's tickets available for Miami, Texas A&M. A lot of recruits will be on campus to check out another rematch from last year. What are you expecting? Who are some big names to watch down in Miami?
Well, this is a game for Mario Cristobal and the staff to get more people to buy into that program, buy some tickets. These guys are working hard as hell on the trail to return Miami back to the glory days of what we've seen them be multiple times in our lifetime. But LJ McCray is the top recruit that's going to be on campus for Miami, uncommitted in that regard anyway, from Mainland High there in Daytona Beach. LJ McCray we got a chance to watch Florida State play last weekend. More on that in a little bit, but this is an opportunity for Miami to show LJ McCray, hey, this is a program that's on the rise. This is a program that has everything you're looking for from a player development standpoint, playing on the biggest stage, playing in the biggest games, and getting developed to be the player you want to be. This is an opportunity to make a statement against the ranked Texas A&M team in town, because Georgia is the program that I think has the momentum there. Florida's another program that's been mentioned a lot there, but Florida State and Miami trying to make moves. And then top 247 edge rusher Booker Pickett Jr. is going to be on campus. He's a Miami legacy recruit. He has the Hurricanes in his top 5. He too saw Florida State play last week. But I think that if Miami's pushing there, they could ultimately be tough to beat for Booker Pickett Jr. And then they have a couple guys committed. Top 247 athlete JoJo Trader, and then top 247 defensive lineman Artavius Jones. Schools like Florida State aren't going away on those 2 young men, so getting them back, getting them around your staff, getting them around the team to show them how this team is developing from year 1 to year 2 with their own eyes, letting them be able to visualize themselves as future Hurricanes. It's big to get those commits back on campus for this ball game, as schools certainly haven't stopped recruiting each of them.
All right, before we let you go, quick rewind. Florida State with a statement victory over LSU in week 1. So how much momentum have you seen from that convincing win on the trail for the Noles?
Well, I logged the 24/7 Sports crystal ball forecast in favor of Florida State for one of the top uncommitted players in the country, one of the top defensive backs in America, Jamari Howard from Miami. I've been hearing a lot of buzz that they've been the program to beat for a while. Talked to him after the game. He's like, I knew they would win against FSU. And things that stand, he just finds Florida State to be a hard-working program. He fits in with the guys on the team. He talked about how dedicated everybody is. I know he's really connected with that staff. Now, Miami, they're not going to go away on Jamari Howard, but I think current pulse, In addition to that game, I like where the Seminoles sit, so it was time to log a pick. They had Jeremiah Smith there, number 1 receiver in the country. We've said on the show it's going to be extremely hard to flip him from Ohio State, but he's got an official visit to Florida State down the road. Maybe if Keon Coleman has a monster year, he saw him have a monster game, but that Florida State offense, he really likes Norvell, so they're going to hang in there and try and keep chipping away. Georgia, there's been some buzz behind the scenes at Georgia. Don't sleep on them to ultimately flip KJ Bolden. I think that got harder. KJ Bolden was at the game, number 1 safety, talked to him afterwards. He absolutely loved the experience. I talked to some of those recruits. They put the recruits right next to the Florida State band. They just said the atmosphere was incredible in Orlando if you were watching it through the lens of a Florida State prospect or Florida State recruit. So even though Mike Norvell and company couldn't talk to them at the event, those recruits got a chance to really feel it out. And then LJ McCray, I had Florida State running 3rd for him coming into that game. And I don't necessarily know exactly where they are coming out of it, other than that he's got his official visit coming up here in the fall. And they gave him a lot to digest, as this is a program that is in the hunt to potentially win a national championship. And he's the type of player that can help keep that trajectory what it is, because Florida State is one of the most exciting teams in the country. They returned the most starters. Am I right, Emily? Correct me if I'm wrong. From the year before, they got their quarterback, Jordan Travis. They're dynamic on offense. That defense was suffocating in the second half. And LJ McCray had a great seat for all of that as they try and recruit against Georgia. We've seen Florida State have some success against Georgia this cycle, from Landon Thomas to KJ Bolden. Those are guys that we've had Georgia in the driver's seat for. We have Georgia in the driver's seat for LJ McCray, but can Florida State do what they've done a couple times already? Those are national championship type recruiting wins, and they're going to try for another there with LJ McCray.
Steve, you are correct. It's amazing what one massive win can do. Thank you. You can read more of his work on 247sports.com. And as always, for more exclusive information, become a VIP member.
Swing pass out of the backfield, little screen caught by Dylan Edwards. He's got men in front of him running at the 30 to the near sideline to 35-40. Up the sideline. Here he goes. 35 on his way to the end zone. Touchdown. Oh, the young man out of Derby, Kansas. He is lightning. He is quick. He is streaking.
Welcome to college football, Dylan Edwards, man. 3 receiving touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and look at those numbers, 135 yards on the ground. That was just week 1. We want to hit on some more freshmen to watch for week 2 with a guy who helped scout and rank these college football rookies. It's Cooper Petagna. Cooper, before we get into some of these names, we saw freshmen around the country have that first game experience under their belt. Our director of research, Ryan McGrady, told us that 46 of those freshmen started, and 482 total have played. So now that those jitters are kind of behind them, they got that 1 game under their belt, how much can you see a freshman grow week 1 to week 2?
Well, I think you said it. I think it's more about getting back down to earth, right? You get to equilibrium a little bit. It's just football. And we saw Dylan Edwards. You read the stat line, 135 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns. These guys can make an impact. I think it's less about the improvement they're going to make from week 1 to week 2, but I do think you're going to see these guys be in a more comfortable environment. The game is going to slow down a little bit, and it's going to be getting back to the basics, right? It's not going to be too big for them. There's a lot of guys. I know one guy we're going to talk about, Francis Mauigoa, right? Mm-hmm. But it's a big stage for him. Miami of Ohio week 1. Now he's got A&M week 2. So good to get that first game under his belt.
Yeah, definitely different competition for some of these schools week 1 to week 2, but I didn't see any jitters for Ole Miss linebacker Suntarine Perkins in week 1. He led the Rebels in tackles, added a sack to that stat line as well. Ole Miss now heads to Tulane. Definitely a tough test there. Why is he a freshman to watch in this one?
He's pretty dynamic. He only had 21 snaps on the defensive side of the football, a lot of those coming in the second half. But this is a guy that we thought could have a Harold Perkins type impact as a freshman. And you see there in limited snaps, he did that against Mercer. Obviously, Ole Miss put up over 70 points in that game. But this is a big opponent for Ole Miss, right? You're going on the road to Tulane, top 25 team. They won the Cotton Bowl last year. They had over 400 yards a total offense against a really good South Alabama team. So I think Suntarine Perkins, it's going to be more situational how they decide to utilize him. But this is going to be a guy, I think the more you see the season unfold, he's going to get on the field more comfortable and start making impact plays.
All right, I know you're really excited to talk about this next one. Huge game between Texas A&M and Miami on Saturday, and Mario Cristobal tabbing Francis Mauigoa as the starting right tackle as a true freshman. We know the Aggies, they have just a little bit of talent on the defensive line. What are you hoping to see from him in this tough test?
Well, to keep Tyler Van Dyke clean, I think that's really going to be so important in this football game. And Tyler Van Dyke, not really known for his athleticism, but a guy that is a pocket passer. And I think Francis Mauigoa had a little bit of everything, had some ups and downs in game one against Miami of Ohio. But the more he sees, more experience he's going to get. There's not a lot of guys like him that can step into his role day one as a freshman at Miami, be able to start and be relied upon. He's going to have his hands full this weekend. Shamar Stewart, one of those guys as well. That's a loaded defensive line room at Texas A&M. So it's going to be a little bit of baptism by fire, but it's a great situation for him to learn.
All right. Speaking of someone on the defensive side of the ball, freshman led his team in tackles in week one. That was Caleb Downs, Alabama safety. He was a freshman to watch for you last week. If I could reach you, I'd give you a little pat on the back. You were correct about that. So tell us, what's the impact for him this week?
Well, he can do a little bit of everything, right? That's what we talked about. We talked about his versatility. He had 66 snaps overall. I think he played like 24 at free safety, 8 in the slot. He played in the box a little bit. So I think that matchup against Texas is going to be key. You know, Quinn Ewers got off to a really fast start in Austin last year against this Alabama secondary. You're going to see guys like Xavier Worthy, Deion Sanders. Those are going to be the guys that Caleb Downs is going to find himself matched up with. And as much as we love Caleb Downs, Steve Sarkisian is going to test a true freshman on a big stage. So he's going to have a lot of action his way. We're going to see how he's going to respond pretty early.
That is a tough test going up in week 2. This is what I meant when I said that there might be a bigger challenge for some of those week 2 opponents. Earlier this week, on my favorite podcast, the Football Recruiting Podcast, you and Andrew Ivins named Dylan Edwards as your freshman of the week for week 1. We showed you that highlight reel. I'm shocked that this is your pick. I mean, over 150 yards, 4 touchdowns, such an impressive performance for him in his debut. But how does he build on that against Nebraska?
I don't know how you can, right? I mean, it was a layup. You talked about the performance and the stats, and they were gaudy. I mean, I think the biggest challenge that offensive coordinator Sean Lewis is going to have, how do you continue to find ways to put Dylan Edwards in space, right? The good thing for Colorado in that offense, they had over 4 receivers with over 100 yards receiving. So he's not the only guy, right? Nebraska is going to have their hands full with that receiving core. Shedeur Sanders is going to be the guy. Looked really poised week 1. So it's about how do we put Dylan Edwards in the best situation to kind of maximize his touches. He's another guy. He's super dynamic in the return game as well. So just find a way. Get him 7-8 touches, whatever it is. After last week, I'd find a way to increase his touches to double digits.
Yeah, even more. Maybe take a little bit of the pressure off of Travis Hunter playing almost all of the snaps on both sides of the ball. Give the rock to Dylan Edwards and good things will happen. I mentioned my favorite podcast. Where can people listen?
Yeah, 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. You can find that wherever you find your podcasts every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Look at those handsome guys right there.
I'll be spending my next 6 years at the University.
There you have it, the number 8 player in the state of Utah, edge Devoux Tuataga, picking BYU. And he is here on the show with us today. Devoux, we are so excited that you are here on the College Football Recruiting Show. First, massive congratulations on your commitment. BYU is the lucky school that gets your services. So what is it about the Cougars that pushed them to the top of your list?
It was a hard decision, but Cougars, it was just like main things that stood out to me were the players, and I wanted to surround myself around players that I could look up to. That was one main factor, and I went to one of the spring practices, and they took me in like if I was already one of them, and they showed me nothing but love. So, yeah, and
Devoux.
Other factors are because of home. Oh, yeah.
Devoux, head coach Kalani Sitake and defensive coordinator Elisa Tuiaki have both been in Provo for such a long time. And over the years, they've been able to put together some really solid defenses. When you get to Provo, when you get on campus, what are you going to be specifically bringing to that defensive unit?
Hopefully I could bring, I just want to put in that hard work. I want to be able to be an asset to the program. I want to be able to push that edge as quick as possible and, develop my body, keep sharpening my skills, and become the best edge rusher I can be.
Now, you're already just a couple of games into your senior season, but you still have months to go until you officially sign. We always like to figure out the timing behind all of this. Why was it important to you to just wrap this process up now with the rest of your season still ahead?
It was really mainly just, I guess, the pressure was really strong. Just all the pressure of being, that player that has a lot rolling on their back, like trying to impress everyone.
You were at the game on Saturday, BYU versus Sam Houston State. And I know that over the summer, you told me that when you went to that spring practice and you were able to step on the field, a lot of the players were looking at you and they're like, oh, look, big man, you're joining us. I know you obviously have the upside physically, you have the frame potential, but what have you specifically been working on, Devoux, as a player to continue to get better?
My footwork, just reading. Being able to read and building a higher IQ about the sport that I love so much. Mainly, shout out to Coach Lay. He helped me develop. Coach Jonah, so many coaches have helped me, develop new moves and how to use the moves and why to use the moves. And, just being able to have that IQ.
Looking at your class as a whole, BYU now has 12 commitments. I know you mentioned that when you stepped on campus, the current players welcomed you in as one of your own, but who is someone that's maybe out there uncommitted, committed elsewhere that you're trying to recruit to join you in Provo?
Well, there's a couple of them. One, the tight end, Brock. He plays in St. George. I'm not sure what school, but he's a baller and he's a good guy. I feel like he would be a good asset to BYU.
Finally, Devoux, now that a decision has been made, I know in the past you've said that you could either take a church mission immediately out of high school or you could get to Provo for a season and go on that 2-year church mission. That's still up in the air. But when you eventually get on campus, when you eventually make it to LaVell Edwards Stadium, what are BYU fans going to be able to see as a defensive player there in that BYU defense?
They're going to see me dominate. I'm going to be pushing. I'm going to make sure I become that player that, everyone can look up to and be able to cheer on. And hopefully I can disrupt a lot of offenses. It's my goal. I just want to hit the quarterback as hard as I can to become the best edge rusher I can be.
I love it. Devoux is going to dominate. There is a ring to that. Congratulations. Thank you so much for being on the show, and good luck the rest of your season. For more on Devoux Tuatanga's commitment and all things BYU this season and beyond, check out Cougar Sports Insider.
This Carl Reed with 24/7 Sports.
That means they don't take breaks if they 24/7.
Around the clock.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You in the class of 2024, you better stop playing around and make a decision.
And I go in there with my wife, and Mike Norvell is talking to a bunch of recruits, and he's got it pumping, he's got it going on. I leave the room with Dan Lannon, but my wife stays in the room with Mike Norvell, and I thought she was going to get in the transfer portal.
If they are going to be recruiting every day, you better be working every day, and that's the real deal.
Dr. Reed is like Nate Dogg. You know it's a hit when he spit.
It's time now to read between the lines, and our topic today, we've had many bumps and bruises with the rollout of NIL, but here's the latest. Former Florida defensive lineman Gervon Dexter, who's now a rookie for the Bears, has filed a lawsuit in Gainesville because of the NIL deal he signed with Big League Advance Fund. For $436,000, apparently had a clause stipulating that Dexter would forfeit 15% of his NFL earnings for the next 25 years. His lawyers are arguing the contract is void and called it, quote, a predatory loan. This is a lot to take in, Carl. We know that, as I said, there's been some bumps and bruises when it comes to NIL, but this is a clear example of NIL gone wrong. Just first off, what are your general thoughts about this?
Well, the first thing we have to realize, Emily, is this is not an NIL deal here. This is, in fact, a predatory loan. What Caleb Williams has is NIL deals. Every time I watch college football this weekend, I saw commercials running to Caleb Williams. What this is Tony Soprano sending Chris Maltasante and Silvio to you every week to pick your money up. That's what this is. This should never happen. This is a predatory loan, and this needs to become an education to every player. And even when you think about the length of the NFL career, we know that the average NFL career is only 3 years anyway. So this is a ridiculous agreement to agree to anyway, and no player should sign up for a situation like this.
But a lot of NIL deals have already been signed, and he's not even in college football anymore here. I mean, how common do you think these bad faith NIL deals and these contracts, how often do you think that they take advantage of some of these athletes?
Every opportunity that they get. For you to work with one of the upper echelon agencies, you have to be one of the top players in the country. Everybody doesn't have that. You have a lot of agencies that are forfeiting, that are asking kids to give you 50% of the deal. They're asking you to give over your rights for your name, image, and likeness for sometimes 20, 30, 40 years. I've seen some of these contracts. So these things are totally out of control, and players are taking advantage of. They better go talk to somebody that they trust. They need to get their own lawyer and their own team, because you don't know what you're signing for. And guys that are desperate for money, sometimes they'll sign their name on anything, but this is very, very bad business.
Fix it for us, please, Carl. I mean, what can be done to fix this situation?
The first thing you need to do is you need to ask your college coach before you sign. Ask somebody in compliance. Show somebody your deal before you put your name on the dotted line that you trust. Ask your coach and your compliance for a list of reputable, respectable agents who have a history of doing good business. But situations like these, you're going to put yourself in a really bad situation. Think about it. You give up 15% of your NFL money, and then what if you have 2 kids and get a divorce, right? 5 or 6 years later. It keeps piling on. What kind of financial position are you putting yourself in? But players have to understand that you have to be. John Calipari would say this all the time about guys who wanted to leave the University of Kentucky early to play in the NBA. Are you ready to be the CEO of your own business? So every college player has to ask themselves, am I ready to be the CEO of my own business? Which means, am I ready to deal with NIL, or am I just signing my name to paperwork and I don't really have an understanding of what's going to transpire?
Best thing I heard you say was to call somebody that you trust that will help you out with this. Carl, you're my first phone call. Thank you.
They can call me. They can DM me and send me the contract. I'll have the right people look at it and make sure they're not getting scammed.
I love it. Carl will help you out. Thanks so much. What that sound means, just because there is no recruiting show over the weekend, does not mean that the world of recruiting stops. So it is time to mark your calendar. Hashtag CommitHQ does not sleep, even though the season is up and rolling. This Sunday at 6 o'clock, 4-star linebacker Chris Cole will announce his decision right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. The Virginia native is picking between USC, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Miami, Georgia, and Tennessee. But Blair, what kind of prospect are these programs hoping to land?
He is one of the best athletes in America, Emily. He finished 4th at the Nike Indoor Nationals in both the 60-meter and 55-meter hurdles. This past summer, he runs a 4.6 in the 40-yard dash, which means he's got the fluidity, he's got the mobility to be able to cover in space. He's able to line up against linebackers and slot receivers, a former defensive back. So the clay is there to be able to mold him as one of the best linebacker prospects in the country.
Looking forward to seeing where he ends up. Meanwhile, 2 top 20 matchups in high school football action over this weekend. We're looking at number 19 Bergen Catholic out of New Jersey taking on number 7 Shamadan Madonna Prep out of Florida. Then it's number 3 Bishop Gorman from Vegas and number 13 Corona Centennial out of California. What action are you taking in this weekend, Blair?
Those two matchups are fine and juicy, Emily, but I'm going to be in Southern California for once, and we'll be hitting a doubleheader on Friday night, St. John Bosco versus St. Francis Academy and Oregon-bound quarterback commit Michael Van Buren. And then on Saturday, it's the battle between the mainland and the islands. Kahuku, the two-time reigning state champion in Hawaii, comes out to play Mater Dei, the number one team in the country. So it's going to be a jam-packed action weekend of high school football.
Also jam-packed in the world of college football. Week 2 kicking off tonight, but the highlights on Saturday include Texas, Bama, Colorado, Nebraska, and Texas A&M visiting Miami. Which matchup are you most excited to see, Blair?
Give me Texas, Bama in Tuscaloosa. The first matchup last year was very, very entertaining, and Texas came up just a bit short. Imagine if the Longhorns win this game. Will we hear the words "Texas is back" next week? It's going to be, I think, a must-watch game for a lot of recruits, a lot of prospects. We heard Steve Wiltfong talk about the players that will be there, and Texas needs this to be able to continue to ascend in the recruiting rankings. A top 3 class last year, number 17 right now. They need to rise on the board, and Bama is going to continue to be Bama, so this is going to be a matchup to watch.
I have that game circled on my calendar as well. It should be a lot of fun after last season. Whew, this is going to be quite the matchup. You got the future SEC thing going as well, so that is a game that I have my eye on for week 2. I am ready for all of this action to kick off tonight. That's going to do it here for our show today. Another reminder, hit that like button on the way out and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel so you don't miss a moment. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.